Well, he was arrested, so what are the charges?
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, there are no specific charges yet. They say he was arrested, but they did not say, because as his prospective attorney, and assuming he paid me up front, as his prospective attorney, that's the first thing that I noticed, because you don't just look at what they say, you look at what they don't say.
Mm-hmm.
They say he was arrested. They did not say what he was charged with. They did not say he was charged with murder. What's good, people? I'm Attorney John Mobley. I have prosecuted and litigated complex civil and criminal cases for over 30 years, and I'm still actively litigating these cases today. My experience was forged in the legal trenches, going toe-to-toe with some of the best lawyers in the country, and I'm still actively litigating these cases. On this podcast, I'll be giving no-holds-barred, hard-hitting legal analysis on the legal issues that are gripping the nation. But you want to hear more than just legalese or legal mumbo-jumbo. It's important to have the perspective of a non-lawyer. So my assistant Kayla is joining me in the podcast, and she's going to ask me the tough questions for which you want the answers. So please join me on Legal Deep Dives and listen to me call it like I see it. What's good, people? Welcome to Legal Deep Dives. I'm here in the club room with Kayla and my production team of Mike and Drew. Kayla, I would ask you how you're doing, but I think everybody can tell how you're doing. You're in the club room with me, so you must be doing pretty good. And so what are we talking about today? I'm sorry, before we even get into that, I'd like you to go ahead and please like and subscribe to the podcast so you get all of our legal updates. And you know, I have been loving reading your comments and reading your questions. I definitely, encourage you guys to do that. That definitely makes the podcast a lot more interesting. Like I always say, consider this less of a lecture, more of a dialogue. Consider yourself here, hanging out in the club room, being open and free to give your opinions, give your thoughts. I don't care if you disagree with me or not. You ain't changing my mind. But hey, you might give me something to think about, or maybe I'll change yours. So what are we talking about today, Kayla?
We're going to be talking about D4VD, David, Mr. Burke.
David with a 4 or with a V?
D4VD.
David
no
with a 4.
I. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, David, that's a very, very sad situation. And because it does involve the gruesome death of a young girl, I'm not going to have that same flippant, smart aleck perspective I have on cases. This is more serious. So I out of respect for the fact that this involved the gruesome death of a young girl, I'll be a little more analytical on this case.
May she rest in peace.
May she rest in peace. This is a horrible circumstance. However, of course, defending the case is something that a lawyer is going to have to do. So my analysis is going to be from a legal and technical standpoint regarding, how this case be defended, how it defend this case. And quite frankly, I do believe this is a defendable case for a number of different reasons. And,
he was arrested, so what are the charges?
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, there are no specific charges yet. They say he was arrested, but they did not say, because as his prospective attorney, and assuming he paid me up front, as his prospective attorney, that's the first thing that I noticed, because you don't just look at what they say, you look at what they don't say. They say he was arrested. They did not say what he was charged with. They did not say he was charged with murder. So that's significant. That is extremely significant that they did not say what he was charged with, because I can guarantee you, in a case like this, particularly because it's high profile, if he was going to be charged with murder, if they had enough evidence to charge him with murder, they would have led with that. Right.
So they have enough evidence to arrest him.
For something.
Right. Why did this take so long? This happened in September. It's April. What, to get probable evidence, what do they have to get? How can they go about it and file it?
Probable cause is what they need. And, you got to keep in mind, in murder investigations, that just because somebody gets killed, they still have to find reliable evidence to identify a suspect. And even once they identify a suspect, they still must have reliable evidence that this person either committed the crime or was somehow involved in the crime. And, we all get spoiled by what we see on TV with the forensic evidence, fingerprints and blood and DNA and hair and trace. And yes, while they do have that, in some cases, the large majority of cases, they don't have that.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't Scooby-Doo. It's not going to be solved in
That's right, Shaggy.
30 minutes.
And ultimately, the majority of these cases are made by witness statements, and sometimes the reality of it is you can't choose your witnesses. Your witnesses may not always be the most reliable. You could have somebody who's completely telling the truth, but if the person that's given the statement that implicates your suspect has no corroboration to his story. If this person, for example, says, yeah, I saw David, commit this murder, this is how he did it, but this person has no corroboration. There's no physical evidence to back up his story. There are no witnesses that corroborate his story, and your witness, has a bad record, is a drug user. Even if you have that, you don't want to take your case, or make your arrest based on that one witness's statement.
Right.
Because, a decent criminal defense attorney is going to just slaughter that witness, So, they got to try to build. They got to try to find other witnesses to corroborate it. They've got to try to find something to further build the case against that suspect. And that just takes time, because if people clam up and keep their mouth shut, I mean, there's only so much that law enforcement can be expected to do. They're not miracle workers, and at oftentimes, again, there is no physical evidence in this, and it sounds like there was none in this case. And, there's some other thoughts about this arrest. My mind is kind of racing on possibilities, because, from a physical standpoint, the girl's body was found dismembered. Okay. However, everyone assumes that she was murdered. Okay. And that's a big assumption. Okay. It is certainly possible. And again, we'll see what the forensic and the physical evidence, says. I mean, she could have died by some other means, and the dismemberment could have been some way just to conceal her death. Okay. And when I say that, and you got to keep in mind, when a person dies, the prosecutor's got to prove they were murdered. Murdered is when you kill a person, with malice aforethought. It involves the unlawful killing. That is the first thing that they've got to prove. Okay. So the question in my mind is if they're able to determine a cause of death. Okay. Because even if they find the body, and even if they can somehow connect her to a particular suspect, being able to establish a cause of death, it's not legally required. Okay. You can actually, I want to be clear for everybody, a person can be convicted of murder even if they don't find a body. There are cases that a person disappears under mysterious circumstances. They find blood. There's evidence that, of suspicious activity, and a person can be convicted of murder even without a body. However, when you don't have a cause of death, you start opening the door.
So would it be more difficult, because they said that her body may have been rotting in there for months prior? Would it be more difficult to find that out later? Extremely
difficult.
Okay.
Extremely difficult, because, when you typically look at cause of death, most murders, the cause of death is going to be some type of physical trauma, blunt force trauma to the head. You hit somebody in the head with something.
Right.
And, and they bleed to death, or the head injury is so severe that it causes death. Okay. And that's something you'll find evidence of with a forensic examination, depending on the condition of the body. Of course, a person can be strangled. Again, and it's harder to find evidence of strangling when a body's kind of decomposed. You're looking, when you have a live body, you can see things like, inditions and fingerprints and, around a person's, in the skin, around the throat. You might see a damaged bones, trachea in the neck, the throat. You might see that. And the indentions on both sides of the neck. When a person, has their hands around somebody's throat, you see that. Of course, if a person's stabbed and they bleed to death, the organs will show puncture wounds. The heart, the liver, the kidneys. Same thing the person shot. You'll see, you can find the bullet most of the time, or you'll see the burns, the gunshot burns when the bullet hit the skin. You'll see things like that, or you see the exit and entry wounds. So, when you have a body in decent condition, you can do a lot of things to determine cause of death. And I have actually been involved in murders where, the body, and I've defended murders, State versus Salts, got reversed on appeal in South Carolina, where they found the body that, had been missing for a substantial time period. It was in a highly decomposed state. And in that case, and I can tell you from experience, there was literally no physical evidence of how that person got killed or how that person died. And in fact, in the case that I defended, the prosecutors put up an expert, a medical expert, to testify that a person can die from blunt force trauma and there be no objective medical evidence to show that he suffered that blunt force. So, and that's what a smart prosecutor does. They put up experts to say that, because someone like me is going to say, well, you don't have this, you don't have that. How can you prove murder? And they'll put up experts to kind of deal with all that up front. So, but you are correct. It is a problem that the body's been decomposed. They're going to really need some strong witness testimony that they can corroborate. But again, we're assuming that she died as a result of foul play. I mean, she could have died from a drug overdose, and somebody freaked out, and said, we got to get rid of this body. We can't have a dead 15-year-old girl in here. We don't need the cops around. I mean, that could happen. I mean, she could have choked to death. And the same thing, hey, we don't need this girl in here. We don't need this bad. I mean, someone could have done, and I'm not saying those things happen, but it's certainly possible those things could have happened. And if those things did happen, if she died by some other means and they cut up her body and because they freaked out, well, it's a crime. It is some crime, desecration of a body is a crime in most jurisdictions. But it's not murder. So those are things that kind of stick out in my mind immediately. And I know his lawyer's made some comments that I find interesting.
What did his lawyer say about it?
His lawyer was very measured in his comments. His lawyer stated that the evidence will show that David is not responsible for the death of that young lady.
Okay.
And that's a very, very clear and measured statement. Okay. And when I say that, he didn't say he's not guilty of any crime. He didn't say that he didn't murder her.
He's completely innocent.
He said he's not responsible for her death. Okay. What that suggests to me is that David knows how she died. He might have been present, truth be told. He might have been present when she got killed. And he might even know about the body being disposed of. Mm-hmm. Okay. But that does not mean he was responsible for committing the crime. I mean, it's certainly conceivable that somebody in his entourage killed her.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was said he had help, and I feel like
he had to. He had to have help, or it's certainly possible that somebody killed him without his knowledge. And he said, "Don't worry, I got rid of the body." That suggests to me that there are going to be some bombshells that come out from the defense in this case, because there's no doubt in my mind that there are multiple people that know how she died, and I think it's very likely what's going to come out is she died accidentally. She might have gotten in a fight with somebody, and somebody, pushed her or hit her, and she fell by accident and hit her head. Mm-hmm. She had a drug overdose, and people panicked, freaked out, and decided they had to get rid of the body. It's certainly, so she could have pulled a gun on somebody. I mean, there's going to be something, and maybe, she struggled, they struggled, and she got killed, during the struggle for the gun. I mean, there's so many possibilities about what could have happened to her that could have led to her dying and him not being responsible, even if he had knowledge. And if he has knowledge of it, depending on how she got killed, I mean, they still need, but I hate to say need, but they want to have some evidence to suggest how she got killed, because if they can have some evidence that she got killed unlawfully, they could still hit him with misprision of felony, which is pretty much when you know a crime has been committed, but you don't tell authorities about it. You know, you withhold information from authorities. That's misprision of felony. Or there's another crime called accessory after the fact.
Right.
When you know a crime's been committed and you take specific deliberate conduct to help conceal the crime. I mean, but those are substantially lesser charges. I mean, those are typically, in this jurisdiction, 5-year misdemeanors or felonies. I mean, so
and that's why it's such an open book on what he was charged with, right?
Yeah. My guess is they have enough evidence to implicate him in some capacity as having some knowledge, and they believe he has more information, and they're trying to get him to cooperate. That's what I think is happening, you know, because typically now if law enforcement is smart, that's what they do. Mm-hmm. They bring somebody in and they say, listen, this is what we got, you know, and there's a psychology to getting a statement from somebody and getting them to cooperate. You know, this thing where people come in and the cops are threatening you with all this time and, you know, you see on TV, that is not effective. What I have seen, because I used to be a prosecutor and I would actually be with investigators when they interviewed suspects. I mean, people that were involved in gangs and people that were tough and people that were already in jail and already in prison and, you know, have very little to gain, very little to lose. I mean, the best results, the way that most people, the method that got most people to cooperate was an investigator was just nice and say, listen, hey, here's the deal, you know, we don't think you were involved, you know, or we think your involvement was minimal. We don't think you're a bad person. We know that accidents happen. We know people do things. We don't think you pulled the trigger. We don't think that you committed the primary act, but we've conducted an investigation. Hey, we've talked to this person. We've talked to this person. We've talked to this person. They all say you were there. So, you know, all we want to do, you know, we're not trying to put you away for life. All we want to do is try to give this person's family some closure. We're going to find out what happened, you know, and you'd be surprised. I mean, that the toughest, cruelest, most callous, violent individuals and gangbangers will just say, okay. And they'll tell you this is what happened. Yeah, I was, because I mean, you know, once they know that you know they were there, they know there's no point in lying mm-hmm. and saying I wasn't there. Because, you know, you've identified all the people that they know. And they'll just say, yeah, you know, this is what happened. And people, and even some of the most violent people are human. They will still sometimes struggle with the fact that they know something or that didn't have to happen to that person. You know, it's one thing when somebody who's a horrible, you know, somebody's another gangbanger or somebody who's another criminal. But sometimes when somebody the person that got hurt wasn't a bad person. I mean, it was a child, it was somebody's grandmother, it was a parent, it was, you know, somebody who got caught in a crossfire. I mean, oftentimes these gangbangers, I mean, they got families. They will see their mom or their grandma or their sister or their little brother in that person who got killed. And that will bother them. They may not say that around their group, but that's something that sticks with them. And, you know, when you approach them in a manner that you're not attacking them, you know, they're not facing 30 years to life in prison. You're just trying to really bring some closure to the people, the family, and you'd be surprised. And my guess is that's what's going on with David. They have enough to charge him with, and they want to get some information, and they'll say, listen, we'll charge you with a lesser charge. We will charge you, you know, we think you're charged with accessory after. That's only a 5-year felony. You're not going to face any more time. It's not a crime. You know, we're going to charge you that anyway. You know, it's not a crime but you're not facing murder because somebody else cut up the body. You know, tell us how it happened. Tell us how many cars you have. I mean, we know you got 10 different cars, David. You know, we know that you let people drive your cars all the time and you don't watch your cars all the time. We know that already. All we want you to do is tell us, you know, what you know about this circumstance. So that's probably what's going on. And based on that, they're going to, you know, charge him with either the least serious crime or a lower number of crimes, because they have that discretion too, and because they can tack on the crimes. They can, you know, accessory after the fact, misprision of felony, conspiracy, you know, contributing delinquency of a minor. They can tack on 5 different crimes where you're facing 25, 30 years, or they can charge you with one simple crime where you're facing 5 years. Your worst case scenario is a couple and you're out. So that's my likely suspected opinion about what they're doing and what they're waiting for to reveal the charges against him.
Do you think that the strong evidence is going to come first, or do you think that somebody is going to confess and that will happen first? Which one do you think will likely lead to more of an answer? Because obviously there may not be an answer with some of the evidence, but which one do you think will provide somewhat of an answer?
I believe the evidence will be the statements.
Okay.
I've said that consistently. When this first happened, if you look back at my TikToks on David, if you look back at my prior podcasts on David, I've always believed that this case will be made based on the witness statements. Because, I will say it again. There's that phrase, there's only one way that 2 people can keep a secret, and that's one of them dies. Mm-hmm. Because, people know about this, and at some point, people just start talking. They say things, they let things slip. And as time goes on, people have less apprehension about getting arrested. They're not worried about it now. They're not as freaked out about it. They think
they get comfortable and think they're not going to get caught or think that nothing's going to happen to them.
That's exactly what happens. And they say things, and the people they say these things to will tell people, and what's not uncommon to happen is somebody you tell something gets arrested on a completely unrelated situation. Mm-hmm. Somebody, for example, this person kills somebody or has information about a murder and tells somebody they do drugs with, and the person they told gets arrested for a drug charge and they're facing time. It's their 3rd strike or they're facing 15 years and, they're looking to cut a deal and they say, well, hey, I can help you out.
I know a secret. Yeah.
That girl that got murdered, I got information. And, they try to corroborate, they try to vet it. They've identified a suspect, and that's how it all unravels. And then again, so that can happen. People get jealous. Again, people think, hey, I've been protecting David all this time. He's not breaking me off. He's not helping my career like he said he would.
Where's my money?
Yeah. He's not taking care of me. Asked him for a favor. He wouldn't do it. He thinks he's too good. I don't even hear from that N-word anymore. Oh, I'm going to show him. All those things happen over time. Mm-hmm. And once that first statement comes out, it's like a snowball. Again, the statements will be the evidence. There's no doubt in my mind about that. That's what's going to come out. And the only question is going to be is, how many statements they have, how reliable they are with the degree of detail, and what kind of corroboration they have. And I say that, when I say corroboration, like I would tell my clients, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 different people that are giving statements against you, I'll have clients say, well, that's just hearsay. They don't have any physical evidence. Yeah, but here's the whole thing, though. If you have 4 or 5 people all kind of saying the same thing, and they're interviewed separately at different dates and times by different investigators, and they're all saying the same thing, and they're all say the same thing that implicates you, they're not all lying. No one can believe they're all lying because the statements are consistent. Doesn't matter that guy's a pothead, or, doesn't matter that guy's a criminal. Doesn't matter that guy's already in prison serving time. They all are saying the exact same thing or giving similar details. They all say these different people were there. They all implicate themselves. They're all giving similar details about what happened. And they were interviewed separately over a period of months by different investigators. And guess what? You're in every single one of those statements. So for me to try to argue that all these people are lying and it's so calculated as your attorney, that's extremely difficult. You'd have to argue some vast conspiracy, which is just unlikely, So again, the statements will be the evidence, and there's no doubt in my mind about that.
And it was said that he was not seen months prior to this arrest. So what suspicion, if any, does that raise about it? Could this hold any power over it? Do you think that his attorney advised him to stay out of the public image, or do you think that was something maybe he wanted to do?
I would definitely have advised him to keep a low profile. In a situation like this, you have to know the law enforcement is watching you. They're watching, where you go. They're watching who you talk to. And because the thing about that is, even if you don't make a statement, if they see you around specific people on a regular basis, what that gives them are prospective witnesses they can lean on. If they see you hanging out with 4 or 5 people all the time, they're going to assume, you know something, that person might know something. We're going to lean on them. And lean on them doesn't just mean, hey, I'm going to call them and ask them for a statement. They'll show up at their job.
They're going to notice a pattern where you go all the time, if you have the same spot for lunch
That's
every
right.
Tuesday.
And those friends of yours, I mean, they will make their lives uncomfortable.
I mean, one ran away to live home with mommy, you know?
I mean, they will come to your house. You know, if you got a wife or a family, the cops are showing up at your house asking questions over and over again. They're harass you. They'll show up at your job. You don't want that. You don't want them showing up at your job. You get fired. They're freaking your wife out. They're freaking your kid out. They're putting pressure on you. You might be doing other illegal things, that you don't want them to know about. And they're putting all kind of pressure on you. And the question becomes, hey, do I want to keep my mouth shut to protect this dude or tell him what I know to get him off my back? Mm-hmm. So it's smart to keep that low profile. That was good advice if his lawyer gave him that advice, because that's what he should have been doing. All right, Kayla, even though this is my show, I'm going to flip the script and ask you to call it like you see it. Do you think David committed this murder?
I can't really say I have an exact opinion. It feels like most of the evidence does point to him.
What
never
evidence?
reported not evidence. I guess I shouldn't say that. The speculation surrounding it. There was no missing report on his car. It's in his car. He was dating her. There were a few videos from his live streams on Twitch going around about him saying some controversial things with her there, and she was going to all of his shows. They had a very close-knit relationship, and she was a lot younger than him.
Well, Kayla, your comments are interesting because, and again, like I say, the fact you're not an attorney, I like to hear your perspective, because, what I'm hearing from you is you think he did it, but you don't really specify any real evidence to reflect that he did it. What you stated was she was in his car and he dated this 15-year-old girl and everybody knew they were together.
Right. I just but my opinion is that he was involved, like you said, in some way, shape, or form. It points more towards him being the main suspect, but doesn't mean he did it. So.
Tell me why you think he's the main suspect.
I mean, I don't know the answer.
And the funny thing is, oftentimes, I mean, I've said it, when a female is murdered, hey, whether law enforcement wants to admit it or not, the boyfriend, the husband, they're always the first suspect. And any cop that tells you otherwise is lying to you, okay? And that's what most people think. They think just like that, hey, she got this boyfriend, he's a rapper. I bet he had, now, of course, finding the body in the car.
That was mainly the only piece that signifies that. But like you said, they have to find hard proof evidence. There has to be something in there. So I feel like it's not fair for me to say anything because I've never followed any sort of lawsuit. I've never followed any sort of trial. I had no interest in any of that before working for you. So mine is only based off what was in the media, and it's not a fair representation of if he did or didn't do it. The only thing I know about it is it was his car. There was no missing report. He's hidden himself. His friend ran away. They had to be involved in that somehow, some way. Not saying they did it. Maybe the friend did it and he was jealous of his relationship with her. I don't know.
I disagree with something you said.
Okay.
About why it's not fair for you to have an opinion on that. Because, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, if I have to defend this case and try this case, I have to try it in front of a jury. Mm-hmm. Jury's not lawyers.
That's
Jury's
true.
people like you, laypersons. So again, you have opinions, you have biases. Everyone has biases and prejudices. And when I say prejudice, I don't mean race. People have perspectives and opinions, pre-existing to this case, ideas. And those are the individuals that make the decision to determine whether or not they think a person is guilty or not guilty of committing a crime.
Right.
So your perspective and hearing the things that are important to you are why I like you on this show. Because most of the people out there that are listening to this show, they're like you. Mm-hmm. They're not lawyers.
They're looking at the TikTok videos about his lyrics and
as far as the car is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And that's why, one of the things I said early on is if it was you, your perspective is based on the fact that you have a car.
That's true.
But if, you were, take not just David, any successful professional musician, actor, athlete, they all have, how many cars do football players have? Mm-hmm. They have a half a dozen, some of which they never drive. How many of these people, and it's celebrities have entourages. And you don't have to be a rapper or an athlete to have an entourage. Celebrities, musicians, they have their people that with them. They have their, they have their friends that are often their assistants. They have, other people that do jobs for them and handle things for them. They normally have a half a dozen people in their circle that are with them. And they normally have multiple vehicles. It is not uncommon for anybody to say, oh, yeah, so-and-so, everybody knows he leaves his keys around.
Right.
So, but you got to attack that with the car because I know that the car is a problem in a lot of people's mind. That's why really a big part of the case's lawyer is early on establishing all the cars he has, I would literally say, sit down with him and say, you tell me the name of every single person that's driven any of your cars. And I'll get them all the gift statements saying which car they drove, how many times they drove it, how long they kept it. Did you ask him every time? Mm-hmm. Have you seen other people? Did you let anybody drive those cars? Because I bet if you do that, you could identify 15, 20 people that had access to those cars.
Because another thing that raised a red flag in my head was the last time the car was seen was outside of his house. Mm-hmm. And then he left on tour. Car went missing. So, you could be right. Maybe he did something to her and told somebody to take care of it. Maybe somebody did something and he was still like, hey, take care of it. Just take one of my cars. But it definitely does raise some flags. It was seen outside of his house. He left on tour. He was like, I don't want to deal with it, But
the thing about him going on tour is you don't just get up and go on tour.
Right.
A tour has been planned for months in advance. You don't just decide you're going to go on tour.
No,
he's not doing comedy clubs in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Going on tour means your agent has planned out a schedule where they booked events and other acts and dates. So that was planned well in advance before this whatever happened.
I'm just saying it's strange that the one car that she was found in was outside of his house. He left on tour and then it disappeared.
That's a problem.
So he wasn't driving his own car. Like you said, it could have been somebody else.
And the fact that the car disappeared when he was on tour, that puts distance between. So that gives them an alibi.
But that also could not be confirmed.
So a lot of interesting things are going to come out of this case. I know a lot of bombshells will come, and I'm looking forward to doing another topic on it.
Yeah, I want to see what's happening. Thank you for the updates. I'm excited to see them as they come along. Hopefully we'll find out some more interesting stuff sooner or later. But the pressing question, do you think he did it?
Kayla, I got to call it like I see it as always. I'm going to call it like I see it. I do not believe the evidence will show that David committed this murder. I believe the evidence will show that he had knowledge or information about what happened, but that he was not, in fact, responsible for her death. Now, I know everyone's not going to like that. I really don't give a damn. But do me a favor, post your comments, call it like you see it. Do you think David committed the murder? Do you think he's a patsy? I look forward to seeing your comments. That's it.
Well, that's all I got. But I do appreciate you taking the time to join me on this legal deep dive. I think it's always fun to discuss these topics, tell you what I think, and get your feedback. I would really appreciate it if you took the time to like the video, subscribe to the podcast, and also I'd appreciate you sending me your comments so we can discuss the topics you want to hear about. That's it.